This Sultai build has been crafted to take advantage of a rule-bending line of text that has been printed on only a handful of cards in Magic's history, and that is, a deck can have any number of cards named. Here, we plan to utilize dozens of copies of the same card as the fuel to this deck's win in a variety of ways engine. With numerous synergies supporting this rat-centric and format-twisting theme, our opponents eventually will succumb to our collective of rats, one way or another. Nashi, Moon's Legacy, debuted in March of the Machine, The Aftermath, and is a 3/4 rat shaman with Menace and Ward 1 for Sultai colors. That's 1 black, 1 green, and 1 blue mana. Nashi's Ward 1 means that if an opponent targets our general with a spell or an ability, then it is countered unless that opponent pays 1 generic mana. Whenever Nashi attacks, we exile up to 1 target legendary card or rat card from our graveyard and copy it. We may cast the copy. Note that we cast the copy while the ability is resolving and still on the stack. We cannot wait to cast it later in the turn. Nashi supplanted Moriphan the Boundless as the general of this commander deck upon its release in The Aftermath. Prior to this transaction, this build was nearly an all Sultai deck outside of 1 card in the 99, and 1 general with a 5-color identity sitting in the command zone. The loss of Moriphan's Anthem effect is inconsequential, and the black mana cost reduction in rat spells we cast was rarely realized, and actually is unnecessary secondary to other options provided in the 99 of this build. With Nashi, we reduce the mana value of our general by more than half of its cost, maintain some rat synergy, as well as diversify and enhance our rat delivery system, which is the engine that drives this deck. Nashi's succession as the general of this deck strengthens the overall build and optimizes our endgame. Since black is the predominant color of this build, our land base tilts in that direction. As such, our basic land count is composed of 7 swamps, 2 forests, and 2 islands. Essentially, this is just about a 2-to-1 ratio of black to non-black basic lands. For the purposes of color fixing, we have each of the appropriate shock lands in Overgrown Tomb, Breeding Pool, and Watery Grave. These lands have 2 basic land types, come into play tapped unless we pay 2 life, and tap to add 1 of 2 different colors of mana to our mana pool. We also have each of the appropriate fan lands in Undergrowth Stadium, Rejuvenating Springs, and Morphic Pool. These lands come into play tapped unless we have at least 2 opponents, and tap to add 1 of 2 different colors of mana to our mana pool. Although their color-fixing ability has a more immediate impact rather than providing balance throughout the game, we also have each of the appropriate pathways as well. Each land has 2 sides, and each side taps to add a different color of mana. We choose one side of the pathway and put it into play. It's either Dark Boar or Slither Boar. It's either Bark Channel or Tide Channel. It's either Clear Water or Murk Water. Most of the time, our desire for immediate color fixing is prioritized over the long game because we want to get our rat engine online as soon as possible, and the pathways can help us do that. Shipwreck Marsh is a slow land. It enters the battlefield tapped unless we control at least 2 other lands, and it taps to add 1 of 2 different colors of mana. The other 2 slow lands, Deathcap Glade and Dreamroot Cascade, are absent from this deck list only due to lack of availability. Once copies of these 2 lands are acquired, they will find their way into the 99. Fabled Passage, Prismatic Vista, Verdant Catacombs, and Misty Rainforest can be tapped and sacrificed to put lands from our library onto the battlefield. Fabled Passage puts a basic land into play tapped, but if we control at least 4 lands, then we untap that land instead. Prismatic Vista also puts a basic land into play, but it costs us 1 life to do so. Both Verdant Catacombs and Misty Rainforest cost 1 life to activate, but they put a land card with at least one of 2 different basic land types from our library onto the battlefield under our control. These cards help to fix our mana and slim down the number of lands in our library. One of the most efficient ways to fix mana is to include lands that tap for any of these colors of mana we need. Command Tower does this. Mana Confluence does this, but we must pay 1 life to do so. Forbidden Orchard does this, but it has target opponent create a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token. Path of Ancestry and Zagoth Triome do this as well, but they come into play tapped. When mana from Path of Ancestry is spent to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry 1. We can pay 3 mana and cycle Zagoth Triome away from our hand to draw a card, which is an ability more valuable than it may appear, particularly as we traverse further into this video. Reflecting Pool should be able to tap for any of the colors of mana we need. Exotic Orchard could do the same, but its mana production is dependent on the colors of mana our opponent's lands can produce. Reliquary Tower completes our land base. It gives us no maximum hand size, which is vitally important in a build that can put a ton of cards into our hand. We do not want to discard these cards down to 7 at the end of our turn. Doing so can slow our rat engine considerably. Cards in hand equals problems for opponents, and they also give us fuel to keep our engine revving. We want to play fast in developing our resources for the purposes of getting our rat-driven engine revving as quickly as possible. Nature's Lore and 3 visits have us search our library for a forest card and put it onto the battlefield. Farseek has us search our library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain card and put it into play tapped. Note that these sorcery spells do not require us to search for basic lands, which means we can search for our shock lands or Zagoth Triome. Our mana rocks begin with Mana Crypt and Chrome Mox. Note that Mana Crypt has an upkeep trigger that deals 3 damage to us if we lose a coin flip. Through Chrome Mox's imprint ability, when it comes into play, we exile a non-artifact, non-land card from our hand. We can tap Chrome Mox to add 1 mana of any of the exile card's colors. Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and Thought Vessel close out our mana rocks. Soul Ring taps to add 2 colorless mana, while Arcane Signet taps to add a black, green, or blue mana here. Thought Vessel's inclusion helps to protect our hand. As we will demonstrate later in this video, we have the potential to hold a lot of cards in our hand, and we do not want to discard down to 7 at the end of our turn. Due to this deck's speed and versatility, it is admittedly a little light on removal and disruption spells. We prioritized our rats and win conditions over opponent interaction, and it shows. For spot removal options, we have Assassin's Trophy and Beast Within. Assassin's Trophy destroys target permanent an opponent controls, and they search their library for a basic land card and put it into play. Beast Within destroys target permanent and leaves its controller a 3/3 green beast creature token for their troubles. For impactful and economical mass removal, Damnation is the gold standard. It destroys all creatures and they cannot be regenerated. If we pay the overload cost for Cyclonic Rift, then we return each non-land permanent we don't control to their owner's hands. Since we can combo off so easily in this build, adding some counter magic helps to ensure that our opponents do not interfere with our rat-led plans. Swan Song counters target enchantment, instant, or sorcery spell, and its controller creates a 2/2 blue bird creature token with flying. Pact of Negation costs nothing up front, but it could cost us everything if we fail to read the fine print. We counter target spell for 0 mana, but at the beginning of our next upkeep, we must pay 3 and 2 blue mana, or we lose the game. If we cast Pact of Negation to protect our combo engine while we are comboing off, then we should not need another upkeep. This deck has 25 copies of Rat Colony in the 99. As alluded to earlier, Rat Colony is one of the few cards in Magic's history to have the rule-bending line of text, a deck can have any number of cards named, and it is legal to do so in the EDH format. Rat Colony is preferred over Relentless Rats here, mainly due to its more manageable mana value, particularly when considering the various ways we can get rats into our hand and onto the battlefield. Rat Colony is a 2/1 rat for 1 and 1 black mana, and it gets +1/+0 for each other rat we control. At times, the lack of a toughness boost acts as a detraction, especially when blocking creatures with trample. But there are benefits to it as well, which we will showcase later in this video. Aside from our 25 copies of Rat Colony, there is only one other rat in the 99 of this deck, and that is Karamonix the Rat King. Karamonix is a 3/3 Phyrexian rat with Toxic 1 for 1 and 2 black mana that gives other rats we control Toxic 1. Players dealt combat damage by a creature with Toxic 1 also get a poison counter, and whenever a player has at least 10 poison counters, they lose the game. When Karamonix enters the battlefield, we look at the top 5 cards of our library. We may reveal any number of rat cards from among them and put the revealed cards into our hand. We put the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. Karamonix adds another rat-driven win condition to this build that was absent prior to its inclusion. Victory through poison counters. The Rat King's toxic enablement allows us to play the long game successfully if needed. It also provides another way to get rats into our hand for the purposes of maintaining tempo and inundating our side of the battlefield with rats. Maintaining a steady stream of rats is important for the purposes of gathering the fuel for our various win condition engines. As Herald's Horn enters the battlefield, we choose rats. Rat creature spells we cast cost 1 generic mana less to cast, which makes our rat colonies cost just 1 black mana to cast. At the beginning of our upkeep, we look at the top card of our library. If it is a rat creature card, then we may reveal it and put it into our hand. Herald's Horn provides us tempo in the form of creature cost reduction and potential card advantage. At the beginning of our draw step, Sylvan Library allows us the option of drawing 2 additional cards. If we do, then we choose 2 cards in our hand that were drawn this turn. For each of those cards, we pay 4 life or put the card on the top of our library. Through this enchantment, we have a good chance of drawing at least 1 rat each turn, and possibly more. Ad Nauseam has us reveal the top card of our library and put it into our hand. We lose life equal to its mana value. We may repeat this process any number of times. This is a benefit of choosing Rat Colony over Relentless Rats. A 1 mana difference in their mana value helps to put more cards into our hand for less life. As our rats enter the battlefield, they have a good chance of triggering Garruk's Uprising. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater comes into play under our control, we draw a card. This enchantment also draws us a card when it enters the battlefield if we control a creature with power 4 or greater. It also gives creatures we control trample. This mass enablement of trample provides evasion to a wide and tall army of rats. While our rats are on the battlefield, we can sacrifice them to greater good in order to draw a lot of cards. If we sacrifice a creature to this enchantment, then we draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power and then discard 3 cards. We should have little trouble filling our hand with greater good in this build. Echoing Return returns target creature card and all other cards with the same name as that card from our graveyard to our hand. This sorcery can return every copy of Rat Colony in our graveyard, and all for just 1 black mana. Secret Salvage exiles target non-land card from our graveyard. We search our library for any number of cards with the same name as that card, reveal them, and put them into our hand. We can exile a Rat Colony from our graveyard, and then put every other copy of it from our library directly into our hand. Even though Rat Colony has a mana value of just 1 and 1 black mana, we still want to find ways to cheat them into play. One way to do this is with Blood Bond March. Whenever a player casts a creature spell, each player returns all cards with the same name as that spell from their graveyard to the battlefield. Yes, this enchantment does provide its recursive ability to our opponents as well, but it will take a scenario as rare as Winter Roses for us to not benefit from it more than our opponents. Another way to cheat our rats into play is with Thrumming Stone. This legendary artifact gives spells we cast Ripple 4, which means that whenever we cast a spell, we may reveal the top 4 cards of our library. We may cast spells with the same name as that spell from among cards revealed this way without paying their mana costs. We put the rest of these cards on the bottom of our library. Although the potential exists for us to whiff on these Ripple triggers, we will take that chance for the possibility of getting numerous rat colonies into play from our library, and for free. Another way to cheat our rats into play is with Allurin. This enchantment allows any player to cast creature spells with mana values of 3 or less without paying their mana costs, and as though they had flash. Yes, Allurin provides this free-to-cast flash enablement abilities to our opponents as well, but we will benefit from it so much more. Note that we can cast our general from the command zone this way, but we must pay any commander tax that has been accrued. We continue this deck tech with a slew of cards that enhance and synergize with our rat-led theme. With a variety of different cards that can lead to game-ending synergies, let's ensure that we can find them with Vampiric Tutor, Demonic Tutor, and Diabolic Intent. We search our library for any card, shuffle it, and put that card on top of it with Vampiric Tutor. We lose 2 life in the process. Demonic Tutor puts any card from our library into our hand. Diabolic Intent does the same with the additional cost of sacrificing a creature. Sacrificing a rat is a small price to pay for a second Demonic Tutor. Regrowth returns target card from our graveyard to our hand. This recursion could be very important for the purposes of accessing one of our rat synergistic cards. Heroic Intervention gives permanents we control indestructible and hexproof until end of turn, which is great at fizzling our opponent's attempts to interact with our board state. Jet Medallion reduces the cost of black spells we cast by 1 generic mana. As we foreshadowed earlier, the 1 toughness of our rats is considered a benefit with Skull Clamp. It gives equipped creature +1/-1, and whenever equipped creature dies, we draw 2 cards. It only costs 1 generic mana to equip, and investing this 1 mana and 1 rat into 2 cards is a great return on our investment. We have demonstrated numerous ways to inundate our side of the battlefield with copies of Rat Colony. Now it's time to utilize this dynamic to win the game. Bantu's Monument reduces the cost of our black creature spells by 1 generic mana, and whenever we cast a creature spell, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain 1 life. Note that creatures we cast with Allurin, as well as creatures rippled by Thrumming Stone, trigger the life drain ability of Bantu's Monument. Whenever a Yara, First of Lochthwain, or another black creature enters the battlefield under our control, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain 1 life. We also can tap a Yara and sacrifice a black creature to draw a card. Note that a Yara's ability triggers whenever a black creature comes into play under our control. Unlike Bantu's Monument, we do not have to cast these creatures in order to trigger a Yara's life drain ability. Our rats can enter the battlefield from our hand, library, graveyard, exile, or command zone. A Yara does not care how they get into play, she only cares that they get there. Combat is also an effective way to try to end the game, particularly when we consider the potentially robust power of our rat colonies. Concordant Crossroads gives all creatures haste, but if we wait to cast it until we know our formidable collective of rats is ready to win the game, then we should be the biggest beneficiaries to this enchantment's global haste enablement. Speaking of benefiting from haste enablement, when a Chroma's Memorial is paired with numerous copies of Rat Colony, they should make beautiful music together to the tune of claiming a quick victory over our opponents. This legendary artifact gives creatures we control flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, haste, protection from black, and protection from red. If our aforementioned scenario rings true, then we should have little trouble closing out the game soon after. Another benefit of our rat colony's low toughness shines through with Tetsuko Umizawa Fugitive. Tetsuko makes creatures we control unblockable if they have power or toughness of 1. There are no effects or abilities in this build that boost the toughness of our creatures. This allows Tetsuko to come into play and make each copy of Rat Colony unblockable. There are a few yet-to-be showcased cards in this deck tech that are critically important secondary to maintaining our eventual game-winning turn. Whenever a player casts a creature spell, Tangleroot adds 1 green mana to that player's mana pool. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, Carnival of Souls has us lose 1 life and adds 1 black mana to our mana pool. These cards provide mana peripherally through the revving of our rat engine, which only helps to fuel it more and more. Speaking of mana, we can sacrifice a creature we control to Phyrexian Altar to add 1 mana of any color. Whenever a creature comes into play under our control, Cream of the Crop provides us the option of looking at the top X cards of our library, where X is that creature's power. If we do, then we put one of those cards on top of our library and the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. Remember, our rats will have very robust powers. It should not take long before we find the card we need to win the game. Now that we have highlighted all of the moving parts to our rat engine, let's put them together and showcase how we win games. Our game plan is tied to and dependent on our copies of Rat Colony. Where are the majority of our rat colonies? Most likely, they're in our library. If so, then we can use a library straight into play option with Thrumming Stone and hopefully ripple each copy of Rat Colony from our library onto the battlefield. To get rat colonies into our hand, if there is a copy of one in our graveyard, then casting Secret Salvage and targeting it can put every copy of Rat Colony from our library into our hand. If there are numerous copies of Rat Colony in our graveyard instead, then casting Echoing Return puts every copy of Rat Colony from our graveyard into our hand. Ad Nauseam also should be able to put several rat colonies into our hand, and some other cards as well. With a hand inundated with rats, we turn to Allurant to get them into play quickly and for free. In each of the scenarios with Thrumming Stone and Allurant, note that with Bantu's Monument and or Ayara First of Locthwain on our side of the battlefield, respectively, each rat colony we cast drains each opponent for 1 life, and each rat colony that comes into play drains each opponent for 1 life. We gain 1 life each time these abilities trigger. Of course, we can also put rat colonies from our graveyard directly into play with Blood Bond March, as long as we have at least 1 copy of it in our hand. With multiple copies in our hand and a Phyrexian Altar in play, we can produce a lot of mana by sacrificing our rat colonies to the altar and then recurring them back to the battlefield through Blood Bond March, a process that becomes even more dangerous for our opponents if Garruk's Uprising is in play and putting multiple cards into our hand. Once we have numerous copies of Rat Colony on the battlefield, victory through combat is easy with the haste enablement of Concordant Crossroads or Akroma's Memorial, as well as the evasion enablement of either Garruk's Uprising or Tetsuku Umizawa Fugitive. Remember, while our rat engine is revving, we can produce mana peripherally through Tangleroot and Carnival of Souls, as well as reap the benefits of manipulating the top of our library with Cream of the Crop. Aside from the aforementioned Garruk's Uprising, we also can gain card advantage with Skull Clamp and Greater Good. Remember, our rat colonies have a toughness of 1, and without any toughness-boosting spells or effects in this deck, paying 1 mana to equip Skull Clamp to a soon-to-die rat puts 2 cards into our hand each time. Since the powers of our rat colonies get bigger and bigger with each rat we control, Greater Good can put a smattering of cards into our hand. However, if a smattering of cards is not as important as 1 specific card, then we have Vampiric Tutor, Demonic Tutor, and Diabolic Intent to find it. There is also the option of cycling Zagoth Triome in order to draw a card, which is particularly helpful if our engine stalls and we just need 1 card to start revving it again. Remember, Jet Medallion, Bantu's Monument, and Herald's Horn respectively reduce the cost of our black, creature, and rat spells by 1 generic mana each, and if we have a reusable source of producing black mana, such as Phyrexian Altar or Carnival of Souls, we essentially can continue casting copies of Rat Colony without the need to tap our permanents for mana. Also remember, while we are revving our way to victory, it is possible that we draw free-to-cast or economically costed resource-enhancing cards like Mana Crypt, Chrome Mox, and Soul Ring, or a much-needed and equally cost-efficient form of protection against opponent interaction like Pact of Negation or Swan Song. With so many different ways to procure and utilize our collective of rat colonies, our avenues to imminent victory are more than plentiful. Hopefully, we will have a plentiful amount of opponents with whom we can continue to play Magic in the future. This Nashi Moon's Legacy build has been added to the Burgeoning Commander Catalog, And this video also becomes the starting point of a Nashi Moon's Legacy EDH deck video primer series. These playlist series can be accessed in the description below, on our YouTube page, or at the end of this video. The Burgeoning Commander Catalog is my personal collection of EDH decks. An EDH deck video primer series showcases the continued evolution of a deck through future appearances on the Up and Up series, during which we update and upgrade decks featured on this channel. The full card list for this build can be found in the description, and be sure to share your thoughts about this Nashi Moon's Legacy deck in the comments section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, yo channel for all things magic.